if everyone else is.
Okay, excelente. Yes, all good, Lupita also. All right. Well, welcome everybody. So glad to have you all here. The first thing I want to do is just introduce our speakers today. So we are here with Charita McClellan. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Charita?
So it's interesting. The Hispanic side of my family pronounces it Charita, and then the other side pronounces it Charita. So I am open to both.
Right on. So Charita or Charita is an MBA in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager. Charita's career has been primarily centered in the finance accounting world, and it was through her volunteer work within the employee resource groups while working at Bank of America that she found her passion for DE&I. So in the past, Charita has served as the professional development chair for the Black Professionals Group, as well as the community engagement chair and Richardson and Dallas site leads for North Texas LGBT plus Pride. Additionally, Charita had the privilege of presenting a product by POC and Women X 3 Strikes at the 2020 Out and Equal Workplace Summit. Charita has the privilege of being the first diversity, equity, inclusion manager at Alteryx, a data analytics software company, and she is responsible for creating and implementing plans as well as leading efforts to promote DEI within all areas of the organization. This includes collaborating with talent acquisition to ensure that the talent pool is diverse and the organization maintains equitable hiring practices, working with leaders to create an inclusive workplace, and assisting learning and development to incorporate DEI elements into the fabric of training modules. Additionally, Charita leads the ERG efforts, ensuring all associates have a place to belong. Charita has a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting from the University of North Texas, a Master's of Business Administration from New York Institute of Technology, and a Certificate in Diversity and Inclusion from Cornell University. We are also joined by Lupita Uribe. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Lupita? All right. She is a senior internal communications manager at Twilio, where she helps keep 6,400 plus employees informed and aligned in the company. Lupita has worn many hats in her career journey, working in journalism, concert production, and finance, and transitioned into the tech industry in 2016. She is a proud Mexicana who is passionate about advocating for Latinx in tech and is a global lead for the Latinx at Twilio ERG board. I also wanted to just introduce myself shortly. I will be moderating our discussion. My name is Blanca Catalina Garcia. I'm an entrepreneur educator and a startup coach. I've led several incubation and acceleration programs, most of which have been focused on Black, Latina, Indigenous, and Asian-led, women-led tech companies. I'm also the CEO and founder of BCG Innovation LLC, where we design programs, innovative programs. And I also currently serve as the MBDA, as in the Minority Business Development Agency at ATDC Startup Catalyst at the Advanced Technology Development Center at Georgia Tech. I've helped many entrepreneurs and innovators, and I'm really excited to talk to you all today. I also wanted to give a shout out to Valo Tusa and Francis Ila or Iya and the Techqueria LHM team for helping us make this happen. And a special shout out to my Techqueria Atlanta team, Margarita Caraballo and Brian Trejo, my Atlanta peeps. Atlanta influences everything. If you don't know, now you know. So I'm really excited to get us started. So before we jump into the conversation, I wanted to just give you all a little bit of an introduction of the topic that we're going to be diving into today. And then we're going to go into questions with our panel here. So I'll be asking questions of Charita, and Lupita is also going to pipe in. So where do we start? So the thing that resonated for me when we talk about belonging, I studied psychology, and I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Has anybody ever heard of that? Well, if you're familiar with it, we'll do a little refresher. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have heard of it, and if you haven't, I'll explain it. So this is like a psychological theory or concept that poses that there are certain things that we need, basic needs that we have in order to reach self-actualization. So what does that mean? The ability to create, to lead, to innovate, to move things forward, to feel freedom, to feel a sense of ownership in the things that we do, right? So this idea of this individual freedom or the capacity to move around in society as a whole integral person, that's the idea of self-actualization. And what Maslow poses is that there's all these basic needs that we have to meet in order to get there, right? And the one that's right before self-actualization on this pyramid, and what's interesting about Maslow's theories is that in his theory, one need, you can't skip one need to get to another. So you basically have to meet one basic need in order to be able to access the next one. And so the one that's right before self-actualization is belonging. And the way that this theory defines belonging is essentially psychological safety. So meaning that psychological safety goes into sort of the freedom of being oppressed, the capacity to be who you are and express yourself safely, right? And this need precedes self-actualization. So if we're going to use this framework as a useful frame of reference for our conversation today, we're going to assume that belonging is pivotal to us in our workplaces, right? So we have a sense, we're in a healthy workplace, we have a sense of self-actualization in order to feel fulfilled, connected, and thrive in our work, right? So one of the things that Charita sort of opened up for us was, she reminds us that DEI has become a focus for a lot of organizations, but that little B, the B at the end, it often gets overlooked. And we know that this impacts the workforce negatively, but at an individual level, people in the tech space are not able to bring their true authentic selves to work. So it's not only not sustainable for the workspace, so for the workforce in technology, but for the individuals that are in that workspace. So that's a great segue to get started and just kind of talk a little bit about what do you see as the difference between inclusion and belonging? Because I think those get conflated often. So Charita, could you share with us and just clarify for us a little bit, what does belonging mean in this context?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times, like you mentioned, this has become a very hot topic. It's trendy from some people, for some organizations, and I'm hoping it no longer is trending. It stays everlasting, right? And so if you break it down to like the bare minimum, when you're talking about diversity, you're really just talking about people with different backgrounds, different ethnic makeups, different religious preferences, different life experiences, right? So you have a diverse workforce because you people have different backgrounds and different life experiences. That is something you can quantify. You could check a box. You could say, hey, you met these goals, and it's tangible. When you talk about inclusion, that's an act, right? So it's an act of including someone. So it's the behavior of. So think about performative allyship, right? That's something else a lot of people have talked about. We have people who are being allies, but they don't really mean it. It's not something they're really following through. They're doing it so they can look like they're playing the part. They're doing it so they can check that box. So performative allyship is something people just may do, but it's an act. So you have inclusion, which is an act. So I might be inclusive now that I have a diverse workforce and make sure I include everyone in the conversation. I might ensure that I go to different people to do different tasks or whatever. I'm being inclusive. It's an act. I may not like that I'm doing it. My heart may not be in the right place, but inclusion is an act, right? Belonging is the feeling. So if I truly feel like I belong here, it's because my coworkers and my company give me psychological safety. I can bring my true authentic selves to work. There are benefits here that support me. There are programs that are being implemented that support me. I'm not just hearing from the C-suite or the executive suite that, hey, this is what we do, but then my frontline managers aren't following through. Not only is it top down, but it's bottom down as well. So really have to look at diversity being really something that's tangible. You can physically look at the fact that, hey, we have a diverse workforce. Inclusion is an act. Now, we want that act to be heartfelt. We want it to be where people are doing it for the right reasons. But just like performative allyship, it could just be doing something that you're doing. And belonging is the feeling. The company feels like you belong here. And so they aren't just talking the talk, right? They're walking the walk with benefits. And then I truly feel like I belong here and have psychological safety and can bring my whole self to work. And I'm not worried about, I'm not apprehensive. I'm not concerned about any backlash. I'm not concerned about being treated differently.
So I mean, aside the obvious, I think this resonates with a lot of people, but why is that important? How does belonging impact the workforce? And on the other side, how does the absence of it impact the workforce?
So from an organizational perspective, if people don't feel like they belong, they're not going to stay, right? So from an organizational perspective, it's going to lead to high turnover rates, low retention rates, and then people who aren't in touch are going to be like, well, why can't we retain this talent, right? In addition, just historically speaking, Black and Brown people tend to not always speak up, not always feel like they have a place at the table, not always feel like they can bring their whole selves to work and share their ideas. And so if you have diversity, because you want to have different backgrounds, you want different experiences brought to the table in an effort, to make your company more profitable, because you're going to have better ideas, right? Innovation is going to be better. If people don't feel like they belong, they're not going to bring those ideas. They're going to be quiet. And eventually they're going to feel uncomfortable. They're going to leave, right? On the flip side, from an individual perspective, if I don't feel like I belong, if I have to continue to tell you the same things about myself, if you continue to ask me the same questions, I feel like you're not listening, then I'm like, okay, you don't really care about who I am. You don't really care about my ideas. So I'm probably going to shrink myself. And so now that I've shrunk myself, I'm not being as fulfilled at my job. I'm not bringing all my great ideas to the table. I'm not performing to my best capability. So you're not getting the best of me either. And I probably am going to leave as well. But while I am here, you're not going to get the best of me. So both the individual and the organization are losing.
Yeah, I see that. So there's cost on both sides, and Rosemary's here is commenting the gap between who I am at work versus who I am in my real life seeps into work burnout and fatigue. Definitely see Absolutely. The high cost of not belonging. Lupita, I'd love to hear your thoughts, if you have any, on your thoughts on sort of like where you're seeing the impact that it can have on the workplace.
Yeah, I think what Rosemary is saying is very real. That code switching of, hey, this is who I am at work, that is a very separate life. I think that takes a psychological toll on us, because we're constantly having to pivot just within our brain of how we can show up and how we are allowed to be successful in the workplace, right? I know this is a conversation that I've had at Twilio with other Latinx employees about, like, hey, we use our hands, we're loud, we're very emotive sometimes. And in certain companies, that can be seen as a negative, as someone who is a little too much energetic. And really it's like, no, it's not too much. We're just enough. And this is how we thrive. When we are our full selves, we can really be empowered to do our best work, because it's holistic, right? For me, I deeply care about being unapologetically me. And I always encourage everyone to do the same, because that's really what makes you different and special. And that energy that you get from just being yourself can be so like beautiful and empowering. And it gives you that extra motivation to really do your work strongly. So I think that is a huge part of it. The other part is, from like a business standpoint, if you don't feel like you belong, there's going to be a higher rate of attrition, and turnover is actually very expensive for a company. So if you're looking at it just from the bottom line, it is profitable to make your employees feel like they belong there and that they can thrive there.
So I know we're going to get into this a little bit more deeply later. And I definitely want to talk about the idea of like, how do we bring our full selves and all that. But before that, just question to you both, starting with you, Charita. so how do we start to create a sense of belonging? What are sort of the fundamentals of creating belonging in the workplace? And also I'm curious about your thoughts as like, who is truly accountable to that?
Yeah, that's the accountability is a very interesting question, right? Because I think that we all individually are accountable for ourselves. I think something I've seen quite a bit as you've individuals who want to look out for themselves and not other people. And I know I think we'll talk about that a little bit later, like inclusion doesn't exclude. Um, so I'll try to stay on topic for the moment. So when we're talking about how do we start, right? I think it's kind of that what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And if I'm going into an organization, I expect them to either one, be very transparent about where they are in their journey, that they know that they have work to do, but they are working on it, and or already have some programs in place, training in place. There are years, as in decades, of training needs to be unlearned, right? Managers have managed a certain way. For instance, I was told out of college not to put my first name on my resume because they're going to know your ethnicity. They may not call you back, right? There are individuals who come over here from other countries and they change their name to make it easier on the individuals here. We're not going to do that, right? So it's a couple things. We need to train our managers, right, to understand that whole leaving who you are at the door because you're going to work, that's played out. We're not doing that anymore. That's out the window. We bring our whole selves to work because our whole experiences is what helps us here with innovation, right? And so there needs to be training done in the organization. You also need to have benefits and programs that benefit individuals at the organization. I know we had Pride Month in June, and so there's always this conversation about rainbow washing, or organizations just changing their logo just to appear that they're doing something, but they have no programs that support the LGBTQ plus community. So the same thing. Don't say that you want Black and Brown people in your organization, but I get here and you aren't partnering with any organizations. There aren't any trainings. There aren't any benefits for us. It's very important, right, that the organizations and the companies establish that groundwork. On the flip side, as individuals come in, we have to be comfortable speaking up. We have to be comfortable raising our hand, pointing out discrimination, pointing out areas of opportunity. If we aren't part of the solution, we're part of the problem. There is no more just taking a step back and being quiet and saying nothing, right? It can be as simple as speaking up for other people. I remember previously I had a manager that always wanted to have a meeting at a particular time, but there was an associate that had to pray at that time. So I was like, hey, that time doesn't work, because he didn't feel comfortable to always have to speak up. So we have to feel comfortable looking out for one another. So I think the accountability actually falls on everyone equally, because if you want change, you have to be a part of it. And that goes from the individual perspective as well as the organization.
Yeah. I would want to add, though, to Charita's point, I think wholeheartedly agree. Everyone has some say in it. The only thing that I feel passionate about, and maybe it's from being in the ERG, is a lot of the time it feels like the ones that are getting served like under or are underrepresented, undervalued, we're the ones that have to speak up and constantly carry that burden of flagging things. And so I think, Charita, you mentioned something that is very helpful, and that's engaging allies and making sure that people can come in and be like, hey, this person's tired. They don't want to educate you anymore. It is, as an ally, I am always looking for those opportunities. And I know when, as a Latina, who is light-skinned, I don't deal with the same things as other Latinos who are not light-skinned, who are not white-passing, who don't look like me. And so I always try to advocate for those folks without taking up space. And that's a tricky line. But I think, one thing that we did when the big Black Lives Matter movement was happening last summer was having space on how to be allies to folks who are directly impacted by this racism, which, sometimes that does include Latinos as well, because we have plenty of Afro-Latinos. And so there is an educational piece to it as well. But I just wanted to call that out. Like, we don't always have to bear the burden. We can always call on our allies. And that accountability, like Charita said, it is spread throughout everyone. And especially, I think, in the workplace, there is a lot of pressure that can be applied at an executive level of, hey, you're missing this point. Yes, you want us to be treated equitably, but you're not creating that program, right? So for example, at Twilio, we were having this issue where we did not have enough people of color in leadership. And especially Black and Latinos, like we were not even in there. And they started a program that is coaching for Black and Latinx employees. And so like something like that, those programs that the company has control and budget for are really impactful in making us feel like we can belong. So
you said a couple interesting things. I'm sorry, you said a couple interesting things that I totally agree with, right? So there's this education component. And so I've had this dialogue with other, individuals who are within the E&I space. And, from one perspective, it's, hey, individuals who are experiencing the injustices of racism, who are having the obstacles, the underrepresented minorities, they should not be responsible to always educate. And I completely agree that there should be responsibility there. But what happens is when people attempt to educate themselves, sometimes they're not doing it accurately. Google is very interesting. There are some reputable sources there, and then there are lovely Wikipedia pages where people put what they want. And so then when people do go educate themselves individually, right, and then they come back and they don't have the right information, then who's responsible? Because at that point, it was like, hey, I'm not responsible to educate you. Go do that yourself. And then when they went to do it, they missed the mark. And they're like, well, I tried to do it, right? And so it's this fine line of, for me, I don't mind educating, but you've got to show that initiative, right? You've got to show that you really care. You've got to show that you are invested. Because I feel like if you're just coming to me to ask the questions and you're not going to do anything about it, why are we wasting each other's time, right? So I completely agree that we are not responsible. We're like, listen, we've been trying, you haven't been listening. So now we're going to take up our space, figure it out on your own. But I also don't want you to miss the mark. I don't want you to read something and go down this rabbit hole and you feel like you've got it. And you come back and I'm like, yeah, that wasn't it, And so it's that fine line of trying to figure out how to walk. And then I'm such a fan and proponent of organizations having like these coaching and these programs. But then I had to step back and I said, but what happens at the end of the program, right? So if you have this program, because we have them as well, and you're teaching women how to do something particular, or Black and brown people how to do something particular, because you want to be able to elevate them. It's also a fine line of, but white people don't have to go through this. So is it that you feel like they're already qualified and now you're making us take extra steps because you feel like we're not qualified? Or is it a, hey, we're trying to fix the injustices that are there, give you some, increase the equity, right? Because we know equality and equity are different, to put you in the same field. And if we do that, then at the end of that program, what happens? Is there a promotion when I complete the program? Is there a salary adjustment when I complete the program? Like, what is the next step? Because just the programs themselves make you kind of step back for a second and say, okay, so you're making me go through all these things, take extra classes, read extra books. You're making me do, and if I'm receiving education, it's great, but now what? And so I'm always at the now what. I know with DE&I, unconscious bias has been a really big training. And I said, everyone knows we have unconscious bias. If you come to me and tell me my child did something, I'm gonna say, well, what did you do to my child? Because I am biased towards my children and they're angels, they would never, right? So everyone knows they have that. But now what? Now that we've identified we have the unconscious bias training, where's the training to tell people what to do next?
Yeah, that's really powerful. So we have some questions in the chat, but before that, I do want to dive into something that y'all brought up that I think is just so key. So just for those of you in the audience that are asking yourselves, like, well, how do I really bring my whole full self? We just talked about this, how we're sort of trying to heal those divisions while advocating for ourselves. And there's like this negotiation of burden. And so, I think one of the things that is definitely, we talk about it. We talk in like this space of empowerment. We talk about taking up space and being our full selves. But what does that actually look like? What would that feel like? What does belonging potentially feel like in the workplace?
So I know for me, if you break down what taking up space means, like physically speaking, the larger something is, the more space that it takes up, right? So if I had a pen and put it on this table, it would take up very little space versus if I had, my suitcase or something, it would take up more space, right? So understanding that you can take up a lot of space really means taking up space in a room. If you think about historically, like I mentioned before, Black and brown people, we tend to shy to ourselves. We tend to shrink ourselves. We're not going to speak up. We're not going to cause any problems. We may hear our management say something we don't agree with, but we don't want to, rock the boat. We don't want to lose our jobs. So we don't say anything. Taking up space means I am comfortable with who I am. So I'm comfortable with my hair being natural, although that seems to be a topic of conversation all the time. If Black people's natural hair is professional, I'm okay that I'm a woman. I'm not concerned with, if you think I'm going to end up having to leave work because I'm having a child, or I'm not concerned with you thinking that maybe I'm emotional, where if I was a man, I'd be passionate, right? I'm a woman. I'm okay with that. I'm queer. I'm okay with that. I don't care if you have a problem with that. So me taking up space is me walking truly in who I am. I bring all the aspects to me, and I'm not going to shrink myself down for you or anyone else. Lupita brought up how a lot of times we talk with our heads, and as you probably see, I do that a lot. And so it can come off. People will say that you're being aggressive. If I get upset and I'm passionate, I might be the angry Black woman. So previously, I might just say, okay, let me stop. I don't want them to feel that way. I don't want them to hear me. No, I'm going to call you out on it. I'm going to call you out. Hey, if I was a male, you wouldn't say that. And I'm accurate in what I'm saying, and I can bring you the facts with it, right? Taking up space is me not having to apologize because you can't pronounce my name, or you don't like the way my food smells, or if there's an accent. I remember being at a Target, and I was looking for a KitchenAid mixer, and there was a gentleman there who was also looking for one, and we saw one, and we were talking about it, and it wasn't the one his wife sent him to get. And so he said, well, I'm going to call my wife and make sure it's okay. And he picks up the phone and he looks at me and says, are you okay if I talk to her in my native tongue? And I was like, who? You're asking me? We're in Target. But he didn't feel comfortable enough. He couldn't take up enough space that it was okay for him in Texas, in the United States, to speak his native language because I was there speaking English. And so he felt like he needed to ask permission of me. And that's just not okay. And so I just think that we need to bring our whole self. So if you don't bring your entire self, you're smaller, right? So if you bring your whole self, you'll be larger and you will take up the space in the room that you are in, that you belong in, that you are able to have.
Yeah. +1 to all of that. I think it really starts with you and really learning how to love yourself and your culture and who you are. There is a lot of conditioning that we go through, especially in the US, where you have to start changing yourself and assimilate, right? And like people in the generation, in previous generations had to assimilate to like really be able to be successful. We're very lucky that in this day and age, that assimilation is actually, I wouldn't say eliminated, but it's deteriorating, right? We are allowed to bring our soul selves. Like times have changed. It's no longer like you have to look like one certain way to succeed. I think the other thing is taking up space doesn't mean that you have to like overdo it, right? Like Charita said, it's just being your genuine self. So being who you are, if you are a quiet Latino, like be you. That you don't have to talk with your hands. You don't have to yell at me. You don't have to like be passionate or emotive if that's not you, but just be yourself. And I think the other thing is if somebody does something where you can educate them, don't hesitate to, because most of the time people will thank you, right? People mispronounce my name all the time. Yesterday, I was in a meeting where I got called Lupita, and I was just like, oh, it's actually pronounced Lupita. And then that person thanked me, and they were like, thank you. I've also had people call me really ridiculous names. Someone called me Eureka once, and I was just like, that's actually not correct. Thank you. But I think you can do it in a nice and polite way, and you don't have to be like, you're an asshole. Don't talk to me like that. Like, unless that person's being an asshole, then maybe you should. Or like if somebody's doing something wrong and you don't want to call them out in front of everyone, that's okay too. You can call, bring them aside after the meeting and say, hey, this is how it impacted me. I would appreciate that you not do that in the future. Because that is also taking up space, even if you're not very boldly and publicly calling someone out. I think always educate, hope that people have the best intentions. And when they don't, when you educate them, you learn whether they do or not in the way that they respond. So I think that that's just a big part. The other part is like, if you are one of those people who is very expressive, like fly your weird flag, like I had on Mexican Independence Day, I had my Mexican flag behind me in my office, and I had a meeting with our CEO, and like, I don't care that I'm meeting with my CEO and there's a big flag in the background, because that's who I am and that's what I care about. So I don't know, just be you and be proud of it.
I think we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable at first, right? It may be a little uncomfortable to speak up and pull someone to the side. I'm virtual, so I have different flags or different whatever on my team meetings all the time, right? And so people first log in, they're like, well, what's that? And I explain it, educate, and I move forward, right? But at first, it might have been a little uncomfortable. And so both individuals as well as organizations are going to have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable until we get to where we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say too, and this speaks more to like how you get to that comfort zone. Mm-hmm. I know that a lot of people of color, we struggle with imposter syndrome every now and then, right? And the thing that I constantly remind myself is I was hired for this role. They hired me, and they are the ones that evaluated my skill set and decided that it was worth being part of this company. Or if you're a contractor, being hired on, like, you were already evaluated for your worth in terms of skill set. And so just bring that confidently, because you already passed the first test. You might as well just keep shining. Sorry, I feel like I'm very preachy and inspirational speaker-esque, but I'm just like, I vibe so hard with this stuff.
Right on. I think your feeling is shared, and I'm seeing the comments. There's a lot of resonance here, and this, it's sort of, as we're talking about this, Marilyn, thank you so much for sharing. I agree. I feel shy about bringing my whole self, and a colleague and friend of mine, Nicole Cabrera Salazar, who also works in D&I, mentioned to me one day, Blanca, it's like we have to walk through a doorway that isn't shaped like our shape. And it's not even that we can just take off our coat. It's almost like we have to cut away pieces of ourselves in order to show up at work. And there's trauma that's connected to that. So I want to flip our conversation onto the other side and talk about how, how do we create spaces of inclusion? What does inclusion mean when Charita, you said inclusion does not exclude, and it's like, okay, well, what do you mean by that? So can you tell us a little bit more about what do you mean by that, and how do we start to create space for people to show up their whole selves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, just being in this space and just being in corporate America, one thing I've seen quite often, unfortunately, is we'll have individuals who say, well, I'm Black and you need to, make space for Black people, but I'm not worried about gender rights. It has nothing to do with me. So I'm going to focus on this area that affects me. Or, I'm a woman, and so I want to make sure you're passionate, empowering women, but I don't really agree with the LGBTQ plus lifestyle. So I'm not worried about their rights. Leave that over there. Inclusion doesn't exclude. So what we don't get to do is say, hey, do something for me, look at my diverse characteristics and make sure you have space for me and you benefits for me, but I'm not worried about my neighbor. That's not how it works. So we are being inclusive of everyone. So we need to think of inclusion being an umbrella. There is room for everyone underneath this umbrella. And we need to make sure that we are being advocates, not just allies, but advocates for every single person. Everyone has intersectionality, right? So if you see me, you're going to say, she's probably Black. I assume she's Black. You're probably going to say, oh, she's probably a woman. And I would agree. You're not going to know that I'm a foster parent, an adoptive parent, and a bio parent. You're not going to know that I was raised by 2 Marines, so veteran rights are very important to me. You're not going to know that several of my adopted and foster kids have had behavioral mental health issues, so mental health is a big issue for me. You may not know that I'm queer. So there's different levels to myself, right? And if we're talking about inclusion and we only focus on gender, women rights, and we only focus on maybe race and ethnicity, you're only focusing on certain parts, only a piece of myself. And so still, Blanca, as you mentioned through that door, I still would have to cut parts away from myself. So yes, the female part of me could go through and the Black part of me could go through, but the parent part of me may not be able to. And the queer part of me may not be able to. And so the person that feels so passionate about veterans because of how she was raised may not be able to go through. And so we cannot exclude. We need to ensure that we are making space for everyone. We are inclusive of everyone. We don't get to pick and choose. And in addition to that, I would have to say that I feel like in general with DE and I and B, unfortunately, the faith-based community a lot of times gets put to the side, right? Because they're not included in the conversations. They may have faith that goes against some of the policies their corporations are having. We don't get to exclude them either. It's totally fine if you're faith-based and maybe you don't agree, or maybe you do agree with certain gender roles, and so you don't like that we're focusing on gender diversity, or maybe you don't agree in gay marriage. And I tell people who are faith-based, it's totally fine if you don't agree with gay marriage. If someone gay asks you to marry them, you should say no. It's totally okay. But it doesn't mean that somebody else can't then, participate in gay marriage. And so I like to make sure that they're included in the conversation because we want you to be able to show up and your faith and your morals are part of who you are. You can't bring only part of that to work either. But we don't then get to exclude someone else. So inclusion means to include everyone. And until we are including everyone, we are missing the mark every day.
And it sounds like almost as if we are redefining not just inclusion, but redefining what is a good professional. What is it mean to be successful in tech? What is the picture or the model or the archetype of success, leadership, or a person who belongs in this space? It's almost like we're changing that. Lupita, did you have any thoughts to add to that as well?
Only that I think, if you feel like you're being excluded by having someone be included, bring it up and talk about it, but do it in a respectful way. Debate it. I'm always down to have a debate. I think it's important to have debates and talk about sentiments. And at the end of it, you can disagree with people and that's okay, but be respectful and don't impede on people's rights or, you can disagree with me being Latina or an immigrant, okay, that's fine, but don't talk down to me, don't insult me. And it's funny, I saw a message from Giovanni saying that having a flag could be considered a political statement and may alienate coworkers. I actually don't agree with that because for me, I'm showing up as myself, and if that makes someone uncomfortable, that's okay. It's if I come in and I'm like, Mexicans are the only people in the world that matter and we're the ones that deserve the right and we're the best over everyone. If I'm insulting or talking down on someone, disrespecting someone or impeding on somebody's rights, then I think that's a different conversation. But just having it I don't think culture is something that is political. I think culture is something that is personal.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have another friend and colleague, Denisha Thompson, who's also Indiana. I said to me, Blanca, we have to have courageous conversations. And that's really what you're talking about, this idea of giving space. It's not just about space of what we say we include, but it's almost as if we're giving space to show up as our full selves and have real and authentic conversations so that we can collaboratively negotiate what inclusion looks like for us in our communities of our workspaces. So I did want to go ahead, so we're really close to time. I did want to go ahead and offer a little bit of space for questions. There was a question that came up earlier, and I'm just searching for it here in the chat. But and I think it was from Zoe, and Zoe, I'm gonna screw it up. But I think you were asking about how to show up as an ally, and how to show up if you're somebody who you really care about this, but you have white privilege, and you want or whatever that privilege you have access to, and you want to show up for those in your workspace that don't have access to that and are feeling excluded and are feeling like they are not part of the belonging narrative. So can you share some thoughts on that, Charita?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say I'm someone who, I try not to differentiate words too much, but I do believe there's a difference between an ally and being an advocate, right? So an ally is me saying, hey, I'm an ally to the Latinx community, right? I support you, and I can tell you that, and I'm good. An advocate is an action. And so I think the way to be different is there needs to be some action there. And so if you are wanting to advocate for individuals in your organization, you're speaking up, maybe you're having a dialogue with them to find out kind of what their needs are, and then you are using your voice to say what they are saying. Do not center yourself. Make sure you are centering them. Maybe you are active in employee resource groups. Maybe you have the ear of an executive or someone who has the opportunity to make some changes, and you use that time and space with them to speak on behalf of, advocate for that group. And so for me, there has to be some action there. I did a dialogue before talking about the difference between allyship, advocacy, and being an activist. And I would have to say, in order for someone to truly be an ally or advocate or something for me, it needs to be loud and proud. You need to, if we're somewhere and someone speaks up and I'm about to say something, you can be like, Charita, I got it. And you can speak on behalf of me. There has to be some action there.
Lupita, did you have any thoughts to share with us about that?
Yeah, so I think another part of going for Zoe's question was around, like, how do you advocate and step in without stepping on them? Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard because it's very nuanced, right? Like, you can't always know what the right thing to do is. But I would say if somebody hesitates when they're being talked at or to, maybe jump in and say, hey, that's not really an appropriate comment. Or if somebody, talks over somebody, just be like, oh, sorry, I think you just interrupted this person. Mm-hmm. And there are little ways where you can just pop in very quickly and succinctly, and it's not a discussion. It's a, hey, stop that. And if you need to educate, I think you can always let that person take the lead. But if they feel tired, or if you say, hey, like, I'm happy to jump in if you need a little bit of extra support, there's always a space to do that. And I would also say, like, if you're in meetings with this person or around this person and you have seen it come up a couple of times, you can always ask them, privately, hey, I noticed that this is a topic that comes up. I know it can be burdensome to be educating these folks constantly. Mm-hmm. Would you want support in that? This is my perspective. And then that gives you space to be further educated and get their perspective so that it's personal to them.
Yeah, it's almost like what. So there's a sort of incremental process to it where those who have that social capital within that space and that belonging is still being built can use it. So it's sort of like, are you willing to put your social capital on the line? So are you willing also to have courageous conversations with, like fellow coworkers, white coworkers, male coworkers who are, who maybe aren't as woke, and kind of pushing back, and then also going back and saying, like, how can I advocate for you? What was this like? Opening that door. I always say that the door opens from the inside. So yeah, that's really, really insightful. So I know we're right at time and people are moving on to the next sessions. There was a request to share LinkedIn. So if y'all want to share your LinkedIn so people can connect. And I just want to give, as long as we still have people in the crowd. So I just want to give Charita and Lupita a chance to just give us one final thought to walk away with. I always think about, if I only knew this before, this is what I would tell myself. And so I'd love to hear what your just like the thought that we could take away if you took away nothing else.
I would say that I need everyone to know that they belong, right? There's no one who tells you you belong. So I think you have to have that confidence in yourself in knowing that whether I walk into a Walmart, I walk into downtown San Francisco, I walk into my corporate office and I'm sitting with my CEO, I belong wherever I am. I think Lupita mentioned a very valid point. If you're working a job, they already evaluated you on your skills and said, hey, you can do this job, and they hired you. And so, as mentioned, we deal with imposter syndrome a lot, wondering, should we really be here? Are we supposed to be here? Am I here to fill a quota? I want everyone to have the confidence and to believe that they belong. Period. There's no question. There's no test to be taken. There's no one to sign off. There's not a permission slip that you need. No matter where you go, you belong. And so take up that space. You belong fully. Bring your whole self everywhere you go, because you belong there and they are lucky to have you.
Yep. Plus one. And I would also say that the way you go about things can make a big difference. If you do something out of love for yourself and love for your community, it's always going to show, right? So if you, even when you're educating somebody or correcting them, it's because you love yourself and you love the people who are being impacted negatively, that you actually course correct. And so I think that's a really big thing for me. Like, I constantly am trying to exude that love and just partnership with people of, hey, we've got this. We're all learning. We can all grow. But it's really important that we do it right. So I think definitely plus one to everything Charita said, but love is big for me. And compassion.
I love that. Love. Yeah. We're walking away with you belong. And at the core of it, your guiding post is love. I love that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Charita. Thank you, Lupita. Thank you to our amazing participants for all of your thoughtful, vulnerable comments. And we would love to connect with you later on in the conference. I hope to see you out there. And thanks for joining us. Feel free to step off, and we'll continue to connect later on. Thanks so much. Muchas gracias.
Thanks,
Hasta luego.
Thank you.